Well, let's start with the news that is just coming in. China has issued an advisory to its nationals in India, telling them to pay close attention to their safety amid the ongoing standoff in Doklam near the Sikkim section of the border. The advisory, posted in Chinese and dated July 7th on the embassy's website, tells Chinese citizens in India to pay close attention to local security situation, improve awareness of protecting themselves, strengthen security, reduce unnecessary travel, and in advance inform family and colleagues and friends of their travel. It also called on citizens to carry personal identification and follow strict compliance with Indian laws and regulations, respect for local religious customs, and also said that the advisory is latest move by Beijing to ratchet up pressure over the standoff. So China issuing advisory to its citizens. Let me go across to my colleague Anant, who's joining us from Beijing. Anant, how is China looking at the increased escalation for its tourists who are coming from China to India? Will there also be a rethink on visas being given to Indian tourists to China in the backdrop of this advisory now?
Well, Devina, so far there hasn't been any repercussions on travel. In fact, even on the Kailash Yatra itself, which was the only thing affected so far in Nathula, it has been proceeding smoothly through Lipu Lake and even through Nepal. So visas are being issued, but it's clear that this advisory is probably a political move, given that there hasn't been any incidents of safety involving Chinese nationals in India. And it's possibly a diplomatic tool just to ratchet up pressure and keep up the pressure on India over the standoff. Because these advisories, as you know, Devina, are often political. For instance, it's a glaring discrepancy that when 2 Chinese nationals were killed in Pakistan last month, there was no advisory issued. So it's very clear that this advisory is probably as much about politics as real concerns over safety. And given the fact that it's very widely reported by the Chinese media this morning, this advisory, it also keeps up the pressure domestically in China to keep this standoff alive. It's a very hot issue, underlining China's anger towards India, which is what the Beijing government has been doing in the past 2 weeks.
All right, let me get in also India Today's Gaurav Sawant, who's joining us. Gaurav, what's your assessment of China's travel advisory?
You know, Anant has hit the nail on its head. This is mounting more pressure on India diplomatically, psychologically, because if you'd recall, the moment the standoff happened between Bhutan and India on one side and China on the other, after China started bullying Bhutan, India stood its ground very firmly but very politely. So there was a lot of, very, very shrill, provocative statements coming from China, no reaction from India. So now China is changing tactics by mounting pressure this way. And Anant rightly pointed out that 2 Chinese nationals were murdered. They were kidnapped and murdered in Pakistan. No advisory there. No incident has taken place in India, and yet such an advisory. So this is psychological warfare by China, war by other means.
All right, Anant, also, does this advisory extend to the businessmen as well, whose operations are based in India? A lot of Chinese companies have opened their outlets here in India. Is this advisory extending to them as well?
That's correct. We should clarify, it's not a travel advisory aimed at Chinese who are going to India. So that seems to be going on. This is more aimed, the advisory says, for Chinese nationals in India. Of course, as you know, there's a lot of Chinese in the business community in Delhi and Mumbai. So it's targeted to people who are already in India. And essentially, it's a very general advisory. And I can tell you it's almost exactly word for word the similar advisory that Chinese nationals get on their mobile phones when they land in India, which is just gives you the embassy's coordinates and says, well, keep mindful of local customs and of your safety. So it's a very routine advisory, but the timing and the fact that it's posted on the Chinese website, circulated among every Chinese media outlet here in China, it's clearly, as Gaurav also said, I think it's more about psychological warfare, more about diplomatic pressure than really a safety-related issue.
All right, be with me, Anant and Gaurav. Let's take our viewers once again through what that advisory says. It says, pay close attention to local security situation, improve awareness of protecting yourself, strengthen security, reduce the unnecessary travel. In advance, inform your family, colleagues and friends if you're traveling to India. Also, the advisory goes on to say strict compliance with Indian laws and regulations should be done. Respect the local religious customs and also customs with law officer which may ask you for any kind of verification, cooperate with them. Now, Gaurav, this means that China is worried because after all, India is a market for China. Economy and trade are the basis on which the China-India relationship is also being built. This advisory means that China is worried there could be an impact on the businesses of Chinese companies here in India if there's an anti-China sentiment.
You know, that may be one of the considerations, but China's, as you rightly pointed out, Devina, and since you cover economy, since you cover markets, you know this well, that China and India have deepened their economic ties. Even, you know, there is a automobile manufacture unit that's coming up in Gujarat, automotive parts unit that's coming up there. There is more engagement happening economically when it comes to other fields also. But at the same time, China wants to continue to bully India, and this is one area where India is standing up to China. And also not just for India. This is not an India-China dispute. This is India standing up for Bhutan, and China that talks about a peaceful rise in the world is actually looking like a bully that's, bullying its neighbors, and that to such a small country like Bhutan. There are also issues with Vietnam. There are also issues with other countries. So clearly China finds itself perhaps a little nonplussed by India's response. But this doesn't mean that China is going to back down anytime soon. China's, psychological mind games will continue, and India just needs to find an effective countermeasure. At the same time, staying engaged with China on where there are issues of convergence and staying firm on issues of divergence.
All right, Gaurav Anand, thanks for joining us. India Today first reporting on this advisory that's been issued by China for those traveling from China to India.